Hey algebra students, before we went home, we were concentrating on multiplying binomials. I taught you a box method to use to multiply a binomial by a binomial, or what is also called the FOIL method or the distributive property. We ended up with a trinomial as our answer that was quadratic because it would always have an exponent of a 2. I also shared some review and a previous teaching video that I had from a while back last week on Google Classroom. If you haven't watched that yet, you might want to. This week we're going to begin factoring, and in order to do that, I'm going to try something new. Since we're not together, one of the things that we have to be able to do when we factor is to be able to find combinations of numbers that have a certain product and a certain sum. So we're going to work on solving these diamond problems to help give us some practice doing that. So what you're going to be working on in our first video and our first practice is solving diamond problems to find the product of given factors and also the sum that you would get from those same two numbers when you add them together. So for example, when I do these diamond problems, this is how they're going to look. There's going to be an X in the middle, and there will be numbers in each of these four positions. But to start off, you're only given 2. So in the diamond problems, you always want the product up here. So this says product. And you want the sum in this spot down here at the bottom. So this time I'm starting off with the 2 factors that I want to use to find the product. So 5 times 7 is going to give me 35. But I use these same numbers to find the sum of those numbers as well. So 5 plus 7 would give me 12. Moving on to the next one. These down here are a little more challenging, but we need to be able to do these as well. So in this problem, my factors are 6 and -3. And when I multiply them together, my product always goes up here. I get a -18, but when I add them together, when I find their sum, 6 plus -3 turns out to be a +3. And then the last one, hopefully you'll notice some coincidences, some things in common with the problem that I have over here on the board. I've got my 2 factors to be -4 and 2, which you might notice are 2 of the numbers in the binomials that I multiplied together. -4 times 2 gives me a product of -8, which came up right here in my solution. And the sum of these 2 numbers, when I add -4 to +2, I get -2, which came up in this position of my solution. So there is a connection between what we're doing in these diamond problems that will eventually take us to what we're going to be doing back with our algebra work. So now some other challenging ones. What if we're not given both factors or both addends, but maybe a product with an addend or a sum with an addend? And back here I should have said a product with a factor, an addend with a sum, or in this case we're given the product and the sum. This one is most like what you will be doing the whole time you are factoring. So here, if I know that I have 2 numbers whose product is 20, and one of those numbers is 4, first of all, the only way I can get a positive product is if I have 2 positives or 2 negatives. Since this one is positive, I know this has to be positive, and I also know that 5 times 4 gives me 20. So now I have my 2 addends that I can use to figure out what the sum is going to be. 5 plus 4 is 9. In this one, I know that the sum is 2, and I'm starting with a -7. So what would I add -7 to get an answer of +2? Well, it's going to have to be a positive number that's bigger than 7. And in this case, the only thing that I can add to -7 to get a +2 is a 9. 9 plus -7 gives me a +2. So now I have the 2 factors that I need to find out what the product is. 9 times -7 is going to be a -63. This one was a little more challenging for my videographer to figure out. I won't tell you who that is. I would start with the product though. I know I need a negative product. So that means the only way I can get a negative when I multiply is to have a negative and a positive. And it doesn't matter which one goes where. So I'll just put the negative number here, and this will be where my positive is going to go. Now, the other thing that I know is that my sum of these two numbers ends up being negative as well. And the only way I can add two numbers together and get a negative is if they're both negative, but that's not the case here. And if one is negative and one is positive, the bigger of the two would have to be negative in order for my sum to be negative. So the larger of my two numbers has to go here. This also tells me that my factors have to be 2 units apart from each other. If I want to add them together and end up with a 2, they have to be 2 units away. So the numbers I can multiply to get 8 are 1 and 8, or 4 and 2. Of those two pairs, the only ones that are 2 apart from each other are the 4 and the 2. And I already established how the 4, which is larger than 2, had to be the negative one. So negative 4 times 2 gives me negative 8, and negative 4 plus 2 gives you negative 2. In your work for today, you're going to be completing some of these diamond problems and submitting them through Google Classroom.